I am Natalie, 34 years old, and I just discovered my parents are leaving everything to my brother in their will. For 6 years, I have helped them with mortgage payments, medical bills, and home repairs, while my older brother, Travis, barely calls them. Yesterday, while searching for insurance documents, I found their updated will. Everything goes to him. I was devastated, but decided enough was enough. When Mom texted demanding money for the mortgage, my 2-word reply changed everything. Before I dive into this heartbreaking story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever felt taken for granted by family. Trust me, you will want to see how this all unfolds. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Cincinnati, Ohio. My parents, Richard and Margaret, worked hard to provide for Travis and me. Dad was an accountant at a small firm, and Mom taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school. We were never wealthy, but we had enough. Dad always emphasized the importance of saving money and being financially responsible, which makes the recent events even more ironic. From the beginning, there was a clear difference in how my parents treated Travis and me. Travis is 3 years older than me, charismatic and charming when he wants to be. He could make my parents laugh until they cried with his impressions and stories. People were naturally drawn to him, and my parents beamed with pride whenever someone complimented their son. Behind that charm, though, was a pattern of irresponsibility that started early. Travis rarely completed chores without constant reminders. His room looked like a tornado hit it. He forgot homework assignments and lost permission slips, yet somehow my parents always had an excuse ready. "He is just so creative. Creative people are messy," Mom would say, smiling fondly as she picked up his dirty laundry from the living room floor. "Your brother has big ideas. He does not focus on details because he sees the bigger picture," Dad would explain when Travis failed another math test. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one. I turned in assignments on time, kept my room organized, and followed rules. Instead of praise, my behavior was simply expected. "Of course Natalie did her homework. That is just who she is," they would say, as if my responsibility was somehow innate, rather than a choice I made every day. After high school, I worked my way through college with minimal help from my parents. I took out loans, worked 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore, and graduated with a degree in marketing. It took me 5 years instead of 4 because I had to take fewer classes each semester to accommodate my work schedule. Travis, on the other hand, went to an expensive private university that my parents paid for entirely. He switched majors 3 times before dropping out in his junior year to find himself. This journey of self-discovery involved a 6-month trip through Europe that my parents also funded. "College is not for everyone," Mom said when he returned without a degree or plans. "Travis needs time to explore his potential." What followed was a decade of Travis bouncing between ventures. He tried starting a gourmet food truck, then a photography business, then importing handcrafted furniture from Bali. Each endeavor began with enthusiasm and ended with him abandoning it when the initial excitement wore off or when actual work became necessary. Each failure was funded primarily by my parents, who dipped into their retirement savings to support his dreams. I built my career methodically, starting as a marketing assistant and working my way up to marketing director for a healthcare company. I put in long hours, took professional development courses on weekends, and made strategic moves between companies to increase my salary and responsibilities. By 30, I had established myself professionally and was financially stable. Around that time, my parents began experiencing financial difficulties. The economic downturn affected Dad's firm, and his income decreased significantly. Mom developed arthritis and had to reduce her teaching hours. Their medical bills increased, and they fell behind on their mortgage. That is when I stepped in. At first, it was just helping with an occasional unexpected expense, like when their water heater broke. Then it became regular contributions to their mortgage payment. Before long, I was giving them $2,000 every month, plus covering all medical expenses not covered by insurance. All the while, Travis continued his pattern of failed ventures and unemployment. He would work for a few months at a restaurant or retail store, then quit because it was stifling his creativity, or the manager did not appreciate his ideas. He lived in a studio apartment that my parents subsidized and drove a car they had given him for his 30th birthday. "Your brother is going through a rough patch," Dad would say when I pointed out that Travis should be helping too. "He does not have your stability," Mom would add. "You were always the independent one." My support system during these years was invaluable. My best friend Melissa never hesitated to point out the unfairness of the situation. "They are taking advantage of you, Nat," she would say during our weekly coffee dates. "You need to set boundaries." My boyfriend Daniel provided a more balanced perspective. Having grown up with parents who emphasized family obligation, he understood my desire to help, but also encouraged me to take care of myself. "You can help your parents without sacrificing your future," he advised. Despite the financial strain, I continued supporting my parents. I delayed buying a home, choosing instead to rent a small apartment to keep my expenses low. I drove my 10-year-old car despite it needing increasingly frequent repairs. I postponed vacations and reduced my retirement contributions, all because I loved my parents and believed family should help family. Travis rarely visited our parents. He called on birthdays and holidays, occasionally stopping by when he needed something. Yet they constantly made excuses for his absence and celebrated any small gesture from him as if it were extraordinary. "Travis brought flowers last weekend. Wasn't that thoughtful?" Mom would gush, ignoring that I had paid for their groceries, cleaned their gutters, and taken Dad to his doctor's appointment that same week. I never expected gratitude, but the constant praise of Travis while taking my contributions for granted began to wear on me. Still, I told myself that this was temporary, that eventually my parents would recognize my sacrifices, that my brother would mature and take responsibility. I was wrong on all counts. The day I discovered the will started like any other Saturday visit to my parents' home. It was early April tax season, and I had offered to help organize their financial documents. Mom had been complaining about feeling overwhelmed by paperwork, and Dad, despite being an accountant, had become less organized as he aged. "Thank goodness you are here," Mom said as she welcomed me with a hug. She looked tired, the arthritis in her hands particularly bad that day. "Your father has papers everywhere. I cannot make sense of any of it." Dad was in his recliner watching a baseball game. He nodded in acknowledgement when I entered, but did not get up. "The files are a mess," he admitted. "Getting old is not for the faint of heart, Natalie." I spent the morning sorting through medical bills, insurance statements, and bank records at the dining room table. By lunchtime, I had created an organized filing system and helped them identify several billing errors that I promised to follow up on. "Oh, before I forget," Mom said as she placed a sandwich in front of me, "can you find our health insurance policy? I need to call about that physical therapy claim they denied." "Sure," I replied. "Where would it be?" "Probably in your father's office," she said. "Check the filing cabinet." Dad's office was a small converted bedroom that had once been mine. After I moved out for college, it had become his domain, filled with books, papers, and memorabilia from his 40 years as an accountant. The filing cabinet stood in the corner, overflowing with documents. I began methodically searching through the drawers, creating neat stacks on the desk as I worked. In the back of the bottom drawer, I found a large manila envelope labeled Will and Testament, updated January 23. It had been just 3 months since they had updated it. I did not intend to read it. It was private after all. But as I lifted it, the unsealed flap opened and several pages slipped out onto the floor. As I gathered them, my eyes caught my name in a paragraph near the bottom of a page. Curiosity got the better of me, and I began to read. The language was formal and legal, but the message was unmistakable. Upon their deaths, my parents were leaving their house, all financial investments, insurance policies, and personal possessions to Travis. The only exception was the set of china that belonged to Margaret's mother, which shall go to our daughter Natalie. I felt as if someone had punched me in the stomach. The china set was old and incomplete with little monetary or sentimental value. It had been stored in the attic for decades, and I had never expressed any interest in it. My hands began to shake. I read the paragraph again, thinking I must have misunderstood, but there it was in black and white. Travis would inherit everything of value, and I would get a dusty set of dishes. I do not know how long I sat there, the papers trembling in my hands, long enough that Mom eventually came looking for me. "Did you find the insurance policy?" she asked, then stopped when she saw what I was holding. Her face went pale. "Oh, why?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. She called for Dad, who appeared in the doorway moments later. His expression shifted from confusion to defensiveness when he saw the will in my hands. "You should not be going through our personal papers," he said, his tone more annoyed than guilty. I was looking for the insurance policy," I replied. "Mom asked me to find it. This fell out of the folder." I held up the will. "Why is everything going to Travis?" They exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, Mom sat down on the small office sofa, gesturing for me to join her. Dad remained standing, arms crossed. "Sweetheart, we love you both equally," Mom began, her voice gentle, as if explaining something to a child. "But Travis needs more help. You know that." "You have always been so capable," Dad added. "You have a good job, savings, a stable life. Travis has struggled. He needs a safety net. So my reward for being responsible is nothing, while his reward for a lifetime of irresponsibility is everything." I could not keep the bitterness from my voice. It is not like that," Mom protested. "We are just trying to be practical. Travis will take care of us in our old age. He has promised to move in with us when we need more help." I laughed incredulously. "Travis?" The same Travis who cannot remember to call you on your birthday? The same Travis who has never held a job longer than 8 months? That is who you are counting on. He is changing, Dad insisted. He is more mature now. And what about the $43,000 I have given you over the past 6 years? I asked. Does that count for nothing? Mom looked surprised. You have been keeping track? Of course I have been keeping track. It is my money. Money I worked hard for. Money that could have gone toward my own home or retirement. We appreciate your help, Dad said stiffly, but it does not entitle you to dictate what we do with our assets. It is our money and we can do what we want with it. His words stung like a slap. All these years I had thought I was helping because we were family, because we supported each other. Now it felt like I had been nothing more than an ATM expected to give without question, while they planned to reward Travis for doing nothing. It is just stuff, dear, Mom said, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. Family is what matters, not possessions. If it is just stuff, then why not split it equally? I challenged. Why does Travis get everything? Neither of them had an answer for that. I should go, I said, standing up. The room felt too small, too warm. I needed air. Natalie, please try to understand, Mom called after me as I walked out. We love you, Dad added, but made no move to stop me. I nodded woodenly, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. I gathered my purse and keys from the dining room and left without another word. The image of that will burned into my memory. The moment I closed my car door, the tears came. Hot, angry tears that blurred my vision so badly I could not even put the key in the ignition. I sat there in my parents' driveway, sobbing like I had not since I was a teenager. It was not just about the will, though. That was the catalyst. It was about a lifetime of feeling less valued, less important than my brother. After about 15 minutes, when the initial wave of emotion had passed enough for me to drive safely, I pulled away from their house. I did not go home. Instead, I drove to the small park near my apartment, where I often went to think. Sitting on a bench overlooking the pond, I called Melissa. They what? She practically shouted when I told her about the will. After everything you have done for them, that is beyond messed up, Nat. I know, I said, watching a family of ducks paddle across the water. I just do not understand how they could do this. Because they take you for granted, Melissa said bluntly. They know you will always be there, always help, always be responsible. Meanwhile, Travis gets rewarded for being a complete disappointment. Her anger on my behalf was validating. I was not overreacting. This was genuinely unfair. What are you going to do? She asked. I do not know yet, I admitted. I need to think. After talking with Melissa for nearly an hour, I called Daniel and asked if he could meet me. We met at our favorite coffee shop where I recounted the whole story again. Unlike Melissa's immediate outrage, Daniel listened quietly, his expression thoughtful. That really sucks, he said when I finished. I can see why you are hurt. What would you do? I asked. He took a sip of his coffee before answering. Honestly, I would stop giving them money. Not out of spite, but because it is clearly not appreciated or acknowledged. You have been sacrificing your own financial future for people who are not considering you in theirs. But they are my parents, I said, voicing the thought that had been holding me back. What kind of daughter just stops helping her parents? The kind who has already helped more than most, Daniel replied gently. The kind who needs to start prioritizing herself because no one else is. That night, alone in my apartment, I could not sleep. I kept replaying the conversation with my parents, thinking of all the things I should have said. I got up around 2 a.m. and started making calculations. I pulled out bank statements, credit card bills, and my budget spreadsheets from the past 6 years. The final tally was staggering. Beyond the $43,000 in direct financial support, there were countless other expenses, groceries, I had bought household items, I had replaced dinners out that I had treated them to. The actual total was closer to $55,000. Then I calculated what that money could have done for me. If I had invested it even conservatively, it would have grown significantly. If I had put it toward a home down payment, I would own property by now instead of renting. If I had simply saved it, I would have a substantial emergency fund and more retirement security. Instead, I had handed it over to parents who valued me so little that they were leaving me nothing but an old china set in their will. I thought about all the sacrifices I had made, the vacation to Japan that Daniel and I had planned for our anniversary but canceled because Mom needed dental work not covered by insurance, the smaller apartment I rented to keep my expenses low so I could help with their mortgage, my aging car that needed frequent repairs but that I kept because replacing it would mean less money for my parents. All while Travis lived his carefree life, never contributing, yet somehow deserving of everything in their eyes. By morning, I had made my decision. I created a new budget, one that did not include any support for my parents. It felt both liberating and terrifying. I could suddenly afford things I had been denying myself for years, but I also felt guilty as if I were abandoning my family. Before I could change my mind, I wrote an email to both my parents. I chose email rather than calling because I wanted to be clear and unemotional, and I knew a conversation would likely become heated or dissolve into tears. Dear Mom and Dad, I wrote, after discovering the contents of your will yesterday, I have been doing a lot of thinking. I need to inform you that I will no longer be able to provide financial support. Over the past 6 years, I have contributed over $55,000 to your household expenses while delaying my own financial goals. Learning that you plan to leave everything to Travis makes it clear that my contributions have not been valued or acknowledged. I love you both, but I need to prioritize my own financial future now. I hope you understand. Love, Natalie. I read it over several times, tweaking words here and there, before finally hitting send. Then I turned off my phone and went for a long walk, giving them time to process before I had to deal with their response. When I turned my phone back on 3 hours later, there were 5 missed calls from Mom, 3 from Dad, and multiple text messages ranging from confused to hurt to angry. How could you do this to us? One text from Mom read, We never asked you for all that money. Dad had written, conveniently forgetting the many times they had called with urgent requests for help with bills. Is this some kind of blackmail to get us to change our will? Was another message. I did not respond to any of them. I was not using money as leverage to get an inheritance. That was not the point. The point was that I had been taken for granted, and I was finally standing up for myself. The following day, Sunday, they showed up at my apartment unannounced. Mom was crying, and Dad looked both angry and bewildered. We need to talk about your email, he said when I opened the door. I let them in, maintaining a calm I did not entirely feel. We sat in my small living room, the tension palpable. I meant what I wrote, I said before they could speak. I cannot continue supporting you financially. Because of the will? Mom asked, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Is that what this is about, material possessions? No, I replied. It is about respect and acknowledgement. The will just made it clear how you view my contributions. We appreciate everything you have done, Dad insisted, but that does not mean we owe you an inheritance. I never said you did, I countered, but finding out that you plan to reward Travis, who has done nothing to help you while taking my support for granted, made me realize I need to reevaluate my priorities. Disha! So you are punishing us? Mom said. I am taking care of myself, I corrected, something I should have done years ago. The conversation went in circles for nearly 2 hours. They tried guilt, anger, and finally bargaining, suggesting they might reconsider the will if I continued helping them. That last tactic only reinforced my decision. Their love, it seemed, was conditional on what I could do for them. They left without resolution, both clearly upset. I closed the door behind them and leaned against it, exhausted, but also strangely peaceful. For the first time in years, I had put myself first. The next few weeks were some of the most difficult of my life. My parents launched what felt like a coordinated campaign to change my mind. It started with daily phone calls alternating between guilt trips and angry accusations. The electric bill is due next week, Mom would say, her voice trembling slightly. I do not know how we will manage. We might have to sell the house, Dad warned during another call. Is that what you want? For us to lose our home? I remained firm, though each conversation left me emotionally drained. I am sorry you are struggling, became my mantra, but I cannot continue to be your financial support. When the phone calls proved ineffective, they escalated to unannounced visits. They would show up at my apartment, sometimes together, sometimes individually, often with some small gift or homemade food as a peace offering before launching into the same arguments. We raised you better than this, Dad said during one such visit, disappointment heavy in his voice. Family helps family. Yes, I agreed. Family does help family, but it should go both ways, and it should be appreciated, not expected. The pressure did not come only from my parents. Soon other family members began calling. My Aunt Linda, Mom's sister, was particularly persistent. Your mother is beside herself, she told me during a call. How can you do this to your own parents? Did they tell you about the will? I asked. There was a pause. Well, no, but that is private family business. Exactly, I replied. This is between me and my parents. My cousin Susan texted, Heard you are having money problems. Hope things get better so you can help Aunt Margaret and Uncle Richard again. They were rewriting the narrative, painting me as financially unstable rather than admitting the truth. It was easier, I suppose, than acknowledging they had taken advantage of me for years. Through it all, Travis remained oblivious. According to Melissa, who ran into him at a local bar, he had no idea about the conflict or the will. Your brother was buying rounds for everyone, she reported, definitely not acting like someone concerned about his parents' financial situation. The stress began affecting other areas of my life. I found it hard to concentrate at work, missing deadlines, and making uncharacteristic errors. My sleep suffered. I would lie awake replaying conversations or rehearsing responses to anticipated arguments. Daniel noticed the toll it was taking. Maybe you should talk to someone professional about this, he suggested one evening as we sat on my couch, my head resting on his shoulder. A therapist could help you process everything. It was good advice. The following week, I had my first appointment with Dr. Levine, a family therapist recommended by a colleague. What you are experiencing is a form of family role dysfunction, she explained after I shared my story. You have been cast as the responsible caretaker, while your brother is the perpetual child who needs protection and support. These roles become rigid over time and can be very difficult to change. So what do I do? I asked. You have already taken the first and hardest step by setting a boundary, she said. Now you need to maintain it while managing your own emotions about the situation. We worked on strategies for handling guilt scripts, for responding to manipulation attempts, and techniques for staying calm during confrontations. Perhaps most importantly, she validated my decision. It is not selfish to protect yourself from being exploited, she assured me. In fact, it is necessary for your well-being. Daniel was my rock during this period. He listened without judgment, offered practical support, and provided distraction when I needed to think about something else. He witnessed my tears, my anger, and my moments of weakness when I almost gave in, and he never once suggested I should just resume helping my parents for the sake of peace. I admire your courage, he told me one night. Standing up to family is one of the hardest things to do. 1 month after discovering the will and stopping financial support, I reached a milestone of sorts. I declined a call from my mother without feeling overwhelming guilt afterward. It was a small victory, but significant. That same day, I received a text from my aunt saying my parents were struggling to make ends meet and had started selling possessions. It was clearly meant to make me feel guilty, but instead I found myself wondering why they were not asking Travis for help. I had suggested it multiple times, but they always had an excuse. He was between jobs, he had his own bills, he was not good with money. All true, but all things they were willing to overlook while expecting me to continue sacrificing. The next family gathering was my cousin Ryan's wedding. I debated not attending to avoid the inevitable confrontation, but Dr. Levine encouraged me to go. Avoidance reinforces the idea that you have done something wrong, she pointed out. Showing up with your head held high sends a different message. So I went with Daniel as my date. The ceremony was lovely, but the reception was tense. My parents sat at a different table, occasionally glancing my way, but not approaching. Other relatives whispered among themselves, some supportive, others clearly judging. My Aunt Linda cornered me at the bar. Family comes first no matter what, she lectured. That is how we were raised. I agree that family is important, eh? I replied, using one of the scripts Dr. Levine and I had practiced. But respect and appreciation need to go both ways. She looked skeptical, but was called away before she could respond. Later, Travis showed up late to the reception, already slightly drunk. He greeted our parents warmly, completely unaware of the tension in the room. He noticed me across the hall and waved cheerfully as if nothing was wrong. Either my parents had not told him about our conflict, or he did not care enough to remember. As the evening wore on, I overheard snippets of conversation between my parents and other relatives. They were discussing financial difficulties, medical bills they were struggling to pay, repairs the house needed, all within earshot, all clearly intended for me to hear. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table. You okay? I nodded. Better than I expected to be, actually. And I was. The guilt was still there, but it was less overwhelming than it had been. I was beginning to truly believe that I deserved better than to be their financial safety net while being valued less than my irresponsible brother. A few days after the wedding, I received a text message from my mother that would change everything. No greeting, no small talk, just 5 words that revealed exactly how she viewed our relationship. The mortgage is due $1,450. When my phone pinged with a new message that Tuesday morning, I was in the middle of preparing for an important client presentation. I glanced at it briefly, expecting it to be a good luck wish from Daniel or a question from a colleague. Instead, it was from my mother. The mortgage is due $1,450. No, hi, how are you? No, I miss you. Not even my name, just a demand for money as if I were nothing more than an ATM to her. I felt a surge of emotions, hurt, anger, disbelief. After a month of minimal contact, after all our conversations about boundaries and respect, this was how she chose to reach out. I set my phone down and took several deep breaths using the techniques Dr. Levine had taught me. When I felt calmer, I picked up the phone again and stared at the message, considering how to respond. My first instinct was to write a lengthy explanation of why her message was inappropriate and hurtful. My second was to ignore it entirely. Neither felt right. I typed several responses, deleting each one. I already told you I cannot help financially anymore. Have you asked Travis for help? This is exactly why I had to set boundaries. None of them captured what I really wanted to say, which was that I deserved to be treated as a daughter, not a financial resource. Finally, after nearly 20 minutes of deliberation, I typed 2 simple words and hit send, ask the heir. It was direct, clear, and reminded her of the reason for our current situation without being unnecessarily cruel. The response was almost immediate. A series of text messages from my mother. How dare you? After everything we have done for you, Travis has nothing to do with this. We need help now. I did not respond to any of them. Instead, I silenced my phone and returned to preparing for my presentation, though my concentration was shot. That evening, my father called. I almost did not answer, but decided it was better to face this head on. Your mother is in tears, he said without preamble when I picked up. I am sorry to hear that, I replied evenly. What kind of response was that? Ask the heir. Do you think this is a joke? No, Dad, I do not. I think it is a logical suggestion. You have chosen Travis to inherit everything you own. It makes sense that he should help with preserving those assets. Travis is not in a position to help right now, Dad said, his voice tight with frustration. And I am no longer in a position to be taken for granted, I countered. He was silent for a moment, then said, We need to talk about this in person, all of us, including Travis. I agreed to dinner at their house that Friday. It would be the first time all 4 of us had been together since the will discovery. When Friday arrived, I felt anxious but prepared. Dr. Levine and I had discussed strategies for the meeting, and Daniel had helped me rehearse responses to likely scenarios. He offered to come with me, but I decided this was something I needed to handle alone. I arrived at exactly 6:30, the agreed-upon time. My parents' house looked the same as always, but it felt different, knowing what I now knew about my place in their lives. Mom answered the door, her expression a mix of anger and worry. She did not hug me as she normally would. Travis is already here, she said, leading me to the dining room where Dad and Travis sat at the table. Travis looked confused. Hey, sis, he greeted me with his usual casual wave. What is this family meeting about? Mom and Dad are being super mysterious. So they had not told him. Interesting. We sat down to a dinner of pot roast, my father's favorite. The conversation was stilted, focusing on safe topics like the weather and Travis's latest job prospect, a food delivery app he was developing with a friend, which sounded like all his other failed ventures. Finally, as Mom served coffee and pie for dessert, Dad cleared his throat. We need to discuss the family finances, he began. As you both know, your mother and I are facing some challenges. The medical bills keep coming, and with the reduced income from both our jobs, we are falling behind. Travis nodded sympathetically, but said nothing. Natalie has been helping us for several years, Dad continued, glancing at me, but she has recently decided she can no longer do so. Travis looked surprised. Really? Why not? Before I could answer, Mom jumped in. She found our will and is upset about it. Your will? Travis looked even more confused. What does that have to do with anything? They are leaving everything to you, I said directly. The house, the investments, everything except Grandma's old china set, which goes to me. Travis's eyebrows shot up. Everything? Like everything? Dad nodded. We thought it was the best arrangement. You need more support than your sister. And I have been supporting them for 6 years, I added. Over $55,000 in direct financial help, plus countless other forms of support, all while you have contributed nothing. Travis had the grace to look embarrassed. I did not know it was that much, he mumbled. It would not matter if you knew or not, I said. The point is that I have been taken for granted, expected to help without question or appreciation, while you get rewarded for doing nothing. That is not fair, Mom protested. We appreciate everything you have done. Do you? I challenged, because your text this week did not show appreciation. It showed entitlement. What text? Travis asked. I pulled out my phone and showed him the message. The mortgage is due $1,450. He winced. Yeah, that is pretty bad, Mom. We were desperate, she defended. And where were you when they needed help? I asked Travis. Where have you been for the past 6 years while I have been supporting them? He shrugged uncomfortably. I have had my own stuff going on. Your own stuff, I repeated. Like what, failed business ventures, jobs you quit because they were too boring. Meanwhile, I have put my life on hold to help Mom and Dad. Nobody asked you to do that, Dad said. Yes, you did, I countered. Every time you called about a bill you could not pay, every time you mentioned a medical expense not covered by insurance, every time you said how worried you were about making the mortgage payment, those were all asks. The conversation grew heated. My parents defended their decision about the will, insisting it was their right to distribute their assets as they saw fit. Travis remained mostly quiet, occasionally trying to diffuse the tension with a joke that fell flat. Then, during a particularly intense exchange about fairness and family obligation, Travis said something that made everything suddenly clear. Look, I get why you are upset, Wichohashai, he said to me, but I am the son. In our family, the son inherits. That is just how it has always been. The room went silent. My parents looked uncomfortable, avoiding my gaze. Is that true? I asked them. Is this about gender? Of course not, Mom said quickly. It's quickly, but her eyes darted to Dad. It is tradition, Dad finally admitted. My father left everything to me, not my sisters. His father did the same. I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. This was not about Travis needing more support or being less stable. It was not even about my contributions being unappreciated, though they clearly were. It was about an outdated sexist tradition that valued sons over daughters, regardless of merit or contribution. It is 2023, I said quietly, not 1923. Times change, Dad replied stiffly. Values do not. If your values include treating your daughter as less valuable than your son, despite all evidence to the contrary, then perhaps they should change, I said, standing up. I think I have heard enough. Natalie, please, Mom began, but I shook my head. I love you both, but I cannot continue like this. I will not be taken for granted or treated as less than because I am a daughter instead of a son. I walked out, ignoring their calls for me to come back. As I drove home, I felt lighter somehow, as if a weight I had been carrying for years had finally been lifted. The truth, painful as it was, had brought clarity. The next day, Travis texted me, "That was intense. Are you okay?" "I will be," I replied. "For what it is worth, I think you are right," he wrote back. "The whole son inherits everything thing is pretty messed up. I had no idea that was their reasoning." It was something at least, a small acknowledgement that the situation was unfair. In the days that followed, I received several messages from my parents alternating between defensive justifications and attempts at reconciliation. I responded politely but briefly, maintaining the boundary I had set. The 2 months following the family dinner confrontation were transformative. Without the financial burden of supporting my parents, I found myself with resources I had not had in years, both financial and emotional. The first thing I did was meet with a financial advisor. With my new budget, I could increase my retirement contributions, start saving for a down payment on a house, and even plan for the vacation to Japan that Daniel and I had postponed 3 years earlier. "You are actually in better shape than many people your age," the advisor told me. "You have good income and minimal debt. Without the extra expenses for your parents, you can make significant progress toward your goals in just a few years." It was validating to hear that my financial decisions had been sound, aside from the money I had given away. With a solid plan in place, I felt more secure about my future than I had in years. Therapy with Dr. Levine continued to be instrumental in my healing process. We delved deeper into the family dynamics that had shaped my relationship with my parents and brother. "What you experienced is unfortunately common," she explained during one session. "Many families, even progressive ones, still carry unconscious gender biases that affect how they treat sons versus daughters." We worked through exercises to help me recognize and challenge these internalized expectations. I had spent so much of my life trying to prove my worth through responsibility and sacrifice, believing that if I just did enough, my parents would value me as much as they valued Travis. Now I was learning to find my worth within myself. "Your value is not determined by what you do for others," Dr. Levine reminded me. "It is intrinsic to who you are." My relationship with Daniel grew stronger through this period. He had seen me at my most vulnerable and stood by me without judgment. We began discussing our future more seriously, including the possibility of marriage. "I love how much stronger you have become," he told me one evening as we walked along the riverfront. "Not that you were ever weak, but there is a confidence in you now that is beautiful to see." My friendships deepened as well. Melissa organized a support group of sorts, a monthly dinner with friends who had experienced similar family dynamics. Sharing stories and strategies was therapeutic, and I no longer felt so alone in my struggle. At work, my performance improved without the constant stress of my parents' financial needs weighing on me. I was more focused, more creative, and more willing to take risks. 6 months after setting my boundary, I received a promotion and a substantial raise. Meanwhile, according to family, friends who still kept in touch with me, my parents were struggling. Without my financial support, they had been forced to make difficult choices. They had started selling possessions, beginning with my father's collection of vintage watches and my mother's jewelry. They had also reluctantly asked Travis for help. He had contributed minimally, according to my cousin Ryan, who remained neutral in the conflict. Travis had paid one mortgage payment when they were on the verge of foreclosure, but had then claimed he could not afford more. He asked them for a loan last month, Ryan told me over coffee. Can you believe that? After they paid that one mortgage payment for them, he asked to borrow $2,000 for his food delivery app venture. I was not surprised. Travis had never learned financial responsibility because he had never needed to. Our parents had always bailed him out, and now that they could not, he had no idea how to manage. In an unexpected twist, I received a call from my mother's sister, Aunt Helen, whom I had always been close to, but who lived across the country. I heard about what happened, she said. Your cousin Susan told me some of it, but I would like to hear your side. I explained everything from the years of financial support to the discovery of the will to the revelation about sons inheriting everything. That sounds like my brother-in-law, she sighed. He always was traditional to a fault, and my sister goes along with whatever he wants. What she said next stunned me. I have been diagnosed with cancer, she said matter-of-factly. Stage 4. The prognosis is not good. Aunt Helen, I am so sorry, I gasped. Do not be, dear. I have had a good life. But I am putting my affairs in order, and I want you to know that I have left you everything in my will. I protested that she did not need to do that I was not looking for an inheritance from anyone. I know that, she said. That is why I want to do it. I have always seen how your parents favored Travis, how you worked twice as hard for half the recognition. My estate is not large, but it is something. And unlike your parents, I believe in acknowledging those who have shown character and responsibility. 2 weeks later, Aunt Helen passed away peacefully in her sleep. True to her word, she had left me her modest savings, her small house in Oregon, and a letter that brought me to tears. Natalie, she had written, never doubt your worth. Some people cannot see the treasure right in front of them because they are too busy looking elsewhere. Your strength, kindness, and integrity are rare gifts. I am proud to call you my niece and prouder still of the woman you have become. I decided to use part of the inheritance to establish a scholarship fund in Aunt Helen's name for young women pursuing careers in male-dominated fields. The rest I invested following the advice of my financial advisor. The house in Oregon, a charming cottage near the coast, became a vacation home that Daniel and I visited when we needed a break from city life. This unexpected inheritance was not about the money, though that was helpful. It was about being seen and valued for who I was, something my parents had never fully done. As for my parents, we maintained minimal contact. I called on birthdays and major holidays, sent cards, and occasionally met for coffee in neutral locations. These interactions were civil but distant, nothing like the close relationship we had once had. Travis surprisingly reached out more frequently. The family confrontation had been a wake-up call of sorts for him. He had taken a steady job at a tech company, though he still talked about his app development on the side. I never realized how much you were doing for Mom and Dad, he admitted during one of our infrequent lunch meetings, or how unfair the whole inheritance thing is. He had not offered to change the will situation, and I had not asked him to. That was between him and our parents, but there was a new awareness in him, a glimmer of the responsibility he had avoided for so long. By the end of that transformative year, I had achieved more personal growth than in the previous decade combined. I had learned to set boundaries, to value myself independently of others' opinions, and to recognize unhealthy family dynamics without being controlled by them. I was no longer the family ATM, the responsible daughter who sacrificed her needs for others who did not appreciate her. I was Natalie Strong, capable and worthy of respect, not despite my gender, but regardless of it. 6 months after our confrontation on a crisp autumn day, I received an unexpected call from my father. Can we meet? He asked, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. Your mother and I would like to talk to you. We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between our homes. When I arrived, they were already seated at a corner table, looking older and more tired than I remembered. Thank you for coming, Mom said as I sat down. There was an awkward moment of silence before Dad spoke. We have been doing a lot of thinking, he began, about everything that happened, about the will, about how we have treated you. I waited, not wanting to assume anything about the direction of this conversation. Travis has not been... Dad paused, seeming to search for the right words. He has not been as reliable as we hoped. He helped once with the mortgage, Mom added. But then he asked for a loan the very next month, for his app idea. I nodded, but said nothing. We may have been wrong. Dad finally admitted the words, clearly difficult for him. About a lot of things. It was as close to an apology as I had ever heard from him. We miss you, Mom said, reaching across the table. I let her take my hand, and we realize now how much we took you for granted. We have been struggling without your help, Dad acknowledged, but that is not why we wanted to see you. We wanted to tell you that we are revising our will. I shook my head. That is not necessary. This was never about the inheritance itself. Oh, we know, Mom said, but it is about what it represented, the unfairness of it. We are splitting everything equally between you and Travis, Dad stated. It is the right thing to do. While I appreciated the gesture, I realized that it no longer mattered to me as much as it once had. My worth was not tied to what they left me in their will. Thank you, I said simply. I appreciate that. We talked for nearly 2 hours, covering ground we had avoided for years. They shared their financial struggles, how they had been forced to economize in ways they had never expected. I told them about my promotion, my plans with Daniel, and the scholarship fund I had established in Aunt Helen's name. We are proud of you, Mom said near the end of our conversation. We should have told you that more often. It was a start, not a full reconciliation, but a beginning. We agreed to have dinner together the following week. Over the next few months, we rebuilt our relationship on new terms. I did not resume financial support, though I occasionally helped in small ways, buying groceries when I visited or treating them to dinner. The key difference was that it was now my choice, freely given without expectation and received with genuine gratitude. Travis and I developed a more honest relationship as well. He had taken steps toward greater responsibility, maintaining his job at the tech company, and even contributing to our parents' expenses occasionally. I never understood how much pressure you were under, he told me during one of our now regular brother-sister lunches. I was so used to being bailed out that I never learned to stand on my own. Better late than never, I replied with a smile. My own life continued to flourish. Daniel proposed during our long-postponed trip to Japan under a canopy of cherry blossoms in Kyoto. We bought a small house in a neighborhood we loved within our means, but comfortable and filled with warmth. My career advanced steadily, my newly focused energy resulting in creative campaigns that earned industry recognition. The freedom from constant financial stress allowed me to take calculated risks that paid off professionally. The scholarship fund in Aunt Helen's name awarded its first grants to 3 promising young women, a legacy I was proud to establish. In a way, her final gift to me had become a gift to others as well. Looking back on the journey from that day, I discovered the will to where I stood now. I realized how much I had grown. I had transformed from someone who sought validation through sacrifice to a woman who understood her inherent worth. The lesson had not been easy, but it had been necessary. Setting boundaries was not selfish. It was an act of self-preservation and ultimately self-love. I had learned that helping others should come from a place of choice and abundance, not obligation and depletion. I had also come to understand that family relationships, like all relationships, require mutual respect and reciprocity to be healthy. Love alone is not enough if it is not accompanied by actions that demonstrate value and appreciation. Perhaps most importantly, I had discovered that standing up for yourself does not mean losing family. It means creating the possibility for more authentic connections based on equality rather than exploitation. My parents and I would never have the relationship I had once imagined, but we had something more honest now. Travis and I had moved beyond the golden child and responsible one dynamics to a more balanced sibling relationship. And I had found a family of choice in Daniel, in my friends, and in the community I had built around me of people who valued me for exactly who I was. As I look forward to the future, I no longer fear being taken for granted or undervalued. I know my worth, and I know that real love does not ask you to diminish yourself for others. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took you for granted? How did you handle it, and what did you learn? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength through difficult family dynamics. And remember, standing up for yourself is not selfish, it is necessary. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you courage on your own journey to self-worth.